Hi, this is Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation Podcast. This podcast isn't some magic trick about how to work less. Instead, it's about how to really enjoy the work that you do and to enjoy your vacation time. Hi, it's Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation. What can a single video on YouTube contain? If you were to look at just 6 minutes of a NASA video, it might put you off ocean currents forever. In exactly 6 minutes, the contents of the video contain some of the following: atmospheric circulation, wave formation, thermohaline circulation, upwelling and nutrient distribution, dead zones, sea surface height, shifting rain patterns, and population density. That's only a partial list of what's included in the video, and it hits you with rapid succession. If you're confused, you ought to be, because the video is approximately how we approach most topics. Any topic, is incredibly complex. However, complexity can be quickly deconstructed. That is to say, you can learn a skill or teach someone a skill reasonably rapidly. But you can do so if you're able to break apart the concepts into smaller bits. The question is, where do you begin? What does deconstruction involve, and how do you know that you're going about it the right way? To understand deconstruction, we need to look at 3 elements. The first is where to start your journey. The second is how to find patterns when there is no one to help you. And finally, how to stack the layers as you go forward. So where do you start your journey? Deconstruction always starts with a choice. But what do you choose? Let's find out in the first part, where we look at where to start on your journey of deconstruction. A ton of gold cost about $64.3 million in today's prices. Indians are reputed to own about 22,000 tons of gold. That's a staggering $1 trillion in gold located in a single country. Gold bars and coins are almost always bought at festivals, where buying gold is said to bring luck to the buyers. But the real obsession for gold stems from wedding jewelry. Weddings alone account for 50% of the demand every year. And in South Mumbai, if you wanted to buy gold, you'd head to a particular area called Sonapur. Sona is the Hindi word for gold, and in Sonapur, you'd see dozens of gold merchant stores crammed back to back in a specific area. Now, bear in mind that Mumbai is a big city. It spans 603.4 square kilometers. Yet, someone looking for jewelry, and particularly gold jewelry, would know exactly where to go. We have no such specifics when we're dealing with a vast and complex topic. Let's say you are interested in ocean currents like I am. Well, where do you start? Would you start with wave formation or thermohaline circulation, upwelling, dead zones, or nutrient distribution? Or should you wander right into the sea surface height instead? It's clear that we need to start somewhere, and the best way to get started is to pick subject matter at random. Random? Surely that seems like a crazy way. It doesn't seem like a systematic way to go about deconstruction. But let's pick dead zones from the list above, shall we? It's a pretty random pick considering how much material a 6-minute video can cover. As we dig into the topic, one thing becomes very clear. It's easier to dig deeper into dead zones and see how they occur. So I'm going to play the audio from a video on YouTube, and you'll see how this audio goes into just one topic about dead zones. And because the topic is so small, so regulated, so compact, what you get is this clarity in very short bursts.
Oxygen gets mixed into the ocean by the churning action of waves, currents, and tides on the surface. But it's the great ocean conveyor that takes oxygen to the ocean's deepest depths.
How do we turn off the conveyor? We simply remove the difference in temperature between the poles and the tropics. We warm the poles, we keep the tropics the same temperature. That conveyor, which is driven by heat differences, stops. When it stops, we lose oxygen on the bottom, and we start the mechanism to mass extinction.
See how clear that video was about how we could be headed towards mass extinction, but in a completely different way than you've heard before. Deconstruction becomes clearer when we move into areas we're more familiar with. But what has this got to do with your business? Well, let's assume that you wanted to write a sales page or a landing page and you wanted to figure out how to go about it. Now, the problem with a landing page is that it has headlines, it has subheads, it has first paragraph, problems, solutions, objections, uniqueness, bullets, and the list goes on and on and on. It's easy to get intimidated by such a vast amount of unfamiliar information. It becomes difficult to cope with. So what we have to do is we have to go into random mode. We just pick something, anything, so that we can get going. So let's ignore the vast majority of the landing page and head for the bullets instead. What do you notice when you read the bullets? Well, I'm going to read you a bunch of bullets and you can see them in the transcript below, but here I'm going to read you some of them, and I promise I won't have too many of them, but here are a few of them. The first one, why template-based construction is the key to pain-free landing pages. Why how and why are your best friend in bullet points. How to use sequence graphics to keep your reader on the page. Why bonuses need graphics for maximum impact. How to write bullets that sell even if you can't write. How to avoid ineffective graphics. How to construct power testimonials. Why frequently asked questions are the place for fussy objections. Why the target profile is central to growing your tribe. Did you find a pattern there? Well, let's look at it another way. And what we'll do now is we'll stack them. And you'll get it even if you're listening to it on audio and doesn't make that much sense. So let's stack them. How to assemble all the elements a customer needs to see to buy. How to use a sequence of graphics to keep your reader on the page. How to write bullets that sell even if you can't write. How to avoid ineffective graphics. I said how to many times, right? I'm going to go to why. Why frequently asked questions are the place for fussy objections. Why bonuses need graphics. Why template-based construction is the key to pain-free landing pages. So yes, I did modulate my voice and you figured it out. You figured out that I was using how to in the first set of bullets and then why in the second set of bullets. And really, that's what you notice. You noticed the how and the why the second time around, didn't you? If you're looking at the entire landing page, you're unlikely to notice the pattern, even if someone helpfully placed it in the how and why format. Because you'd be focusing on too large an area, and it's close to impossible to deconstruct your subject matter when the area is too vast. Instead, you need to look at all the components available and just choose a tiny area. It's like the gold place that I talked about earlier, Sonapur. That's where all the gold jewelry is sold. If the entire map of Mumbai were your sales page, Sonapur would represent the bullets. Now, deconstruction doesn't just apply to landing pages and thermohaline ocean currents. When I was learning badminton many years ago, my coach taught me how to win points consistently. My badminton days are a bit of history now. Not so much because I'm getting older, but more so because I'm one of those crazy people that you see on court. You know the type, don't you? They're lunging at everything. And all of that lunging and diving just to win a point ends up with a ton of muscle pulls and strains. Being the super competitive person I am, I hired a coach to help me along. A coach that would help me win points without having to jump about and lunge about so much. But you see the problem looming, don't you? Where do you start? The coach started randomly. He got me to focus on the grip. And you can try this grip yourself even if you don't have a badminton racket around. Just squeeze your fingers together as if you're gripping a racket, and then move your hand forward as if you're hitting a shot. Immediately, there is a tension in the shot. It causes the shuttlecock to go back faster over the net. Now, if you avoid the squeeze and attempt to hit the same shot, the shuttlecock goes a lot slower. And so it drops short of the opponent. By focusing on a subtle component of the entire game, the coach was able to get me to practice the grip. And that alone helped me to win a few extra points in every match. When you look at topics, every topic has multiple layers, and all that stuff, it makes up the whole. The reason why we get confused or are unable to decipher, let alone master the topic, is that we try and take on the entire 604.3 square kilometers of real estate. We should be focusing instead on a single area. But what if you focus on a single area but still can't see the pattern? What if there's no coach around to show you your grip? What if there's no one around to helpfully move those bullets and demonstrate how, and why play a pretty significant role in bullet construction? And how do you go about seeing this pattern yourself? Let's find out in the second part, where we look at how to find patterns when there's no one to help you out. How do you pronounce S-A-K-E? That's S-A-K-E. If you said sake, you're right. On the other hand, if you said saki, you've failed to see the pattern. In almost every phonetic language, the letter E creates an eh sound. So when you read the word K-A-R-A-O-K-E, you are not saying karaoke, but karaoke instead. Once someone points out the pattern, it's easy to correctly use the words in phonetic language such as Maori, Spanish, or Japanese. But what if no one reveals the pattern? In such a scenario, you'd miss the sound of eh and use the E sound instead. But how do you know and how can you find these patterns when there's no one to help you out? Let's try it out now. How do you say K-A-R-A-T-E? And how do you say S-H-I-I-T-A-K-E? You've got it down pat, don't you? If you were to look at these words on paper, it's much harder on audio, but if you will look on these words on paper, you would never say karate or shiitake. You would say karate or shiitake. And no matter how many Japanese words you ran into from now on, you would know that the E is all about eh. This tiny bit of information may not make sense by itself, but when you see the profusion of words that have E, then you realize how many words you're likely to pronounce incorrectly. What you might not have noticed is that you worked out the pattern. For deconstruction, you can't take the entire pie. You have to take a tiny piece of the pie and then focus on that piece. And now instead of focusing on several pies, you just focus on pieces of that pie. To give you an example about the landing page, let's go back to the landing page. If you were just looking at landing page after landing page, you would not see the how and the why so clearly. However, if you were to go from one landing page to another and focused only on that small section, which is the bullets, you would see a pattern in an incredibly short period. Try it yourself. Go to about 5 to 7 landing pages on the Psychotactics site alone, and you'll start to see the pattern of how we use how and why wherever bullets appear. There's other stuff as well, but you see the hows and the whys for sure. But there's an additional bonus in going through many examples. Once the pattern registers, you're likely to see other patterns as well. For instance, a bullet can be written in a very simple way, or it can be embellished to go a bit further. So I'm going to read you one example and then 2 variations of that example. So here's the example itself. How to prepare the room before the presentation. And here's the embellishment. How to prepare the room before the presentation, even if it's been set up already earlier in the day. And the second variation. How to prepare the room before the presentation and make sure nothing goes wrong. So what we did there was we added 2 other elements in the bullets. And if you were reading it, you'd see it right away. It's much harder in audio. What we did was we emboldened those bullets with and or even. The first version had no and or even, then we put in an and, then we put in an even, and you saw that the bullets got better. So as you go through an entire set of bullets, page after page, and nothing but bullets, the secrets of bullets reveal themselves to you. It's approximately how you go about deconstructing just about anything, even when there's no precedence. For instance, during James Hutton's time, the world was thought to have a fixed creation date. Apparently, on Saturday, October the 23rd, 4004 BC, the world was created. Or so it was thought around the time of James Hutton. Hutton is called the father of modern geology because he came up with the fundamental understanding of how geology as we know it today exists. Hutton was curious about how the earth was formed. The religious texts of the day were pretty clear. The earth was 6,000 years old. And this was according to Archbishop James Ussher of Ireland. And that was that. There was no further discussion. That was the topic. The earth was 6,000 years old. And Hutton wasn't exactly convinced, and so he set about on this journey of deconstruction. Hutton's moment of discovery came indirectly because of his whiskey and his women. In 1747, Hutton was a young medical graduate who got drunk and the ladies got too much of his attention. So he managed to get his lover, Miss Eddington, pregnant, and the scandal that erupted saw her being rushed off to London to give birth. Hutton's family too needed to limit the damage to their reputation, and he was forced to leave Edinburgh and go off to a small family farm in Sly Houses, which is in southern Scotland. It was there that he saw the topsoil, and he saw this topsoil running off and going downstream. And, a thought crossed his mind. If the land were always going to be eroded, there would be no topsoil and the crops couldn't grow, and this would cause people to starve over time. Now, Hutton couldn't buy that the earth would be stripped away to nothing. And remember, he was in isolation. He was on this little farm in southern Scotland, and he just rejected the worldview at the time. And then, while he was still on his farm, he figured out how new land could be created. Hutton's examples were the cliffs. Instead of focusing on everything, he focused just on the cliffs. Now, around his farm were dozens, maybe even hundreds of cliffs. And in the exposed parts of the cliffs, he'd have noticed the bands of rock. And they were laid down like layers, one on top of the other. At different times, of course. He'd figured out how rock was formed like no known person had done before his time. Sedimentary rock. Sedimentary rock that's taught in school these days was revolutionary back in Hutton's time. But how did he do it? He looked at example after example until the rock gave away its secrets. Now, you and I could look at rocks all day, and all we'd have is a big headache at the end of the day. But let's stop to think about deconstruction for a second. You could take apart quite a few things in your house or your office today. Over time, and with a little bit of persistence, you'd work out how it was built. The more examples you deconstruct using the very same or similar product, the more likely you'd be to recognize its structure. While it may seem that some people are incredibly intelligent at deconstructing and reconstructing concepts, they're probably just as bright as you. The brain works solely through pattern recognition. If you find enough examples and work with them, you will find that the ideas reveal themselves to you over time. There is no doubt a bit of luck involved. Luck plays as big, if not a bigger role than hard work. But to deconstruct just about anything, you need time and you need persistence and you need lots and lots of examples. It's hard to believe that you, me, any one of us can deconstruct. But you can look through historical or even modern times and find tens of thousands, even millions of examples of people who achieve many deconstruction goals every single year. Nothing is quite as good as a good teacher. A teacher's job is to reduce the learning curve, to make you smart, to make you smarter than the teacher themselves. Even so, you can be your own teacher if you start with phase 1 and you isolate a tiny part of the big puzzle. When you get to phase 2, you're going to need lots of examples, possibly hundreds, before a pattern clearly starts to emerge. Sake, karate, karaoke, that's a pattern. Writing bullets, that too is a pattern. Figuring out how the earth regenerates itself, yes, that's a pattern as well. Which then takes us to our last phase, which is reconstruction, or how to stack the layers as you go forward. Let's find out how it's done. In late October 2016, I gave a presentation at the We Are Podcast conference. The presentation wasn't about how to grow your audience or to monetize your podcast. Instead, the presentation was about the elements of telling a story. For weeks before the event, I struggled with the presentation, and the reason I was so conflicted was due to the length of the presentation. I had just 30 minutes or so to get the point across. How do you take a lifetime of storytelling and encapsulate it in a 30-minute module? You don't. When you deconstruct or reconstruct, the goal should be exactly the same. You're always meant to take a tiny piece of information. So then you have that information and you can go deep. I happen to talk about the elements of story in the presentation, but if I were making a presentation on how a dead zone shows up in the ocean, which is about ocean currents, I'd use the very same principle, and that's what you should do as well. Instead of taking on the entire subject matter, take on the tiny slice of the pie. If you're presenting something about dead zones in the ocean floor, you'd probably cover 3 elements. The first is the ocean conveyor belt. The second, the role of cold water currents and warm water currents. And the third is how dead zones occur. Granted, this is a tiny piece of what you're likely to know about thermohaline circulation. It's a very tiny piece about the ocean conveyor belt, but it's enough. And how do you know it's enough? There's a precise benchmark to know when you're overcooking your information. And that benchmark is the ability of the audience or readers to recall that information. If you overdose them with information, they will recall parts of it, but not all the information. And that's when you know that they're dozing off. That's, when they're zoning out. Because they need to reconstruct it just right. They need to remember without too much prodding. Even if you have 1,000 points to cover, 3 points is usually the best way to go. 3 points force you to constrain yourself, to go deep into your content. For instance, many podcasts on the 3-month vacation cover about 3,000 to 4,000, maybe 5,000 words, yet they only cover 3 points. If I wrote it as an article, it might go to 4,000 or 5,000 words. Again, it covers only 3 points. It's likely that the person reading this information may not be able to recall the 3 points instantly, but give them a tiny summary, a very little summary, and it all comes flooding back. And that's how you know that your reconstruct is goody yum yum. At Psychotactics, we do this reconstruct at our workshops. Take, for instance, the workshop we had on landing pages in Queenstown. That was in the South Island in New Zealand. It was a 3-day workshop. And on the very last day, I got the group to summarize what they had learned. Now, if you've done a solid job, you'll see their eyes, not the top of their heads. No one will be looking down at their notes, scrambling to remember what they were taught. Instead, they will be looking right at you, reassembling the information just the way it was given to them. This technique is also easy to use when making a presentation to a live audience. You can have 200 or 500 or 1,000 people in the audience going through the entire sequence of what you've just taught them. And that's the real feedback, when the audience can remember it all. So, do you remember what you just learned? Let's see, what did we cover? We covered 3 things: where to start on your journey of deconstruction, how to find patterns when there's no one else to help you, and how to stack the layers as you go forward. The journey needs to start with a small slice. Instead of taking on the big topic, you go down to the tiny part. You want to take apart the car? How about holding back a little and just taking apart the wheel instead? If you have someone to help you, a teacher, a guide, then that speeds up the process. But what if you have no one? What if you're like James Hutton and you're faced with the project of doing something that no one has done before? In such a case, and in every case really, you should be looking at a ton of examples. So you start off with a tiny slice and then you look at a ton of examples, because examples help you understand the same problem. It helps you see the same patterns from many angles. Let's say you're looking at a landing page and you're trying to figure out what's happening there. You're trying to figure out how the bullets work. You may not hit the jackpot of how to write bullets, but if you look at dozens of examples of bullets, you'll find the so-called secret, and it will reveal itself to you. So you start off with that slice, you look at dozens, maybe hundreds of examples, and finally it comes back to the reconstruct. And it's important to realize that you have to be a bit stingy with your topics. Instead of covering half a dozen topics when you're delivering that information, just cover 3 main topics and go really deep. You know you're not overdoing the information because the audience can easily recall what you've told them. They don't need to look at notes. So now, even 4,000 words later, you as the reader or a listener, you should be able to remember the points that have been covered and then pass them on to someone else without too much of a problem. You can go, hey, first you have to get the slice. Second, you have to get examples. Third, you have to reconstruct the slice in just 3 points. And that is the short and exciting journey of deconstruction. Now it's time for some sake, yes? Except it's 5:50 a.m. and I think I'll just stick to coffee instead. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. What's happening in psychotactics land? Well, what's happening is the landing pages workshop ended around 2.5 weeks ago. And right now we're doing the first 50 words workshop, which is online. So this is a course online. And people often ask me, what are the first 50 words? You know, when you stand up in front of an audience and you are looking at all of them and they're all got these mobile phones in their hand and they're all on Facebook or social media or something like that. And now you have to get their attention. You have to snap them out of whatever they're doing in the first 5 to 7 seconds. And then you have to keep that attention. And then you have to somehow reconnect it back to whatever it is you're doing, whether it's in fitness or selling info products or selling phones or whatever. This method of being able to snap an audience, whether it's on paper or it's in a webinar or wherever, it's very crucial. And most articles, most webinars, most seminars, most workshops, they're boring because the presenter doesn't understand that they have that responsibility to snap me out, just like we do in the movies. You don't go and, hello, I'm the producer, this is the movie. Hello, I'm the director, this is the I'm the actor. No, the movie snaps you into their world in a matter of seconds. And that is what the first 50 words course is all about. That's what we're learning. It's an exhilarating journey, and later in the year, we'll probably have a home study version of it. The live courses are a lot of fun. They're demanding because you have to do the homework every single day, 5 days a week, but they're a lot of fun. We choose the groups, we make sure everything is perfect. The forum works in a way that you've probably not seen a forum work before. It's just amazing. Now, we can't have too many courses in a year, which is why we have a very small number. And someone emailed me the other day and said, why does Sean not take on more people? Because he wanted to join the 50 words course. Now, it had been sold out 3 months in advance, like all our courses. And it sold out, I don't know, in an hour or 2 hours or whatever time it sold out. And he said, everyone is willing to take another person. Why aren't you willing to take it? And I think it's because I'm more interested in giving you a skill. I'm not interested in just the money. We've made enough money over the years, and it's very good to charge a tidy amount and to make that money because it enables us to live the lifestyle we have. But the crucial factor is to give that client a skill. And how do we know that clients get that benefit? Because when you look at any course, and you can pick any course on psychotactics, you will find that between 30 to 50% of them have done 2 or more courses. Some of them have done as many as 5 courses. And you have to ask yourself, this is like a restaurant. You know, you think of yourself as a restaurant owner and you think, why would they come back? And the only reason why they would come back is because the last meal was outstanding. So when you think of yourself, that's what you've got to do. You've got to think, how do I make every meal outstanding? So that the client goes to other restaurants. They go elsewhere, but they come right back to your restaurant. And this is the philosophy of the podcast. It's the philosophy of the course. It's the philosophy of the books. It's the philosophy of everything. It's not just to create something, but to create something where clients come back. Which is why today's podcast was so critical, because it talks about not burdening your client with information. They want a skill. They don't just want information, and everyone is giving more and more information. And when you look at all those names out there that you're familiar with in marketing or whichever field you're in, you will find that you're getting more and more information. The reason why you're not getting to the end point is because there's too much information and no one or very few people are focused on skill. Anyway, it's time to go now for the walk. It's almost 6 o'clock. So I'll say bye for now. We'll see you in 5000 BC. And we'll also see you in Amsterdam, in somewhere in Stockholm, and then in Singapore. So we're going to have meetups this year. It's not going to be any course. It's not going to be any workshop, but it's going to be meetups. And believe me, you can spend a few hours in this meetup and we can eat and we can drink and we can talk, and you will enjoy meeting Renuka and me. And you should meet Renuka and, well, meet Renuka, and that's good enough. That's me, Sean D'Souza, saying bye for now. And we'll see you on the next podcast. Bye-bye.